I remember the rush that I felt when I first held hands with a girl. It was new, it was exciting, and it made my heart pound like crazy. After that, it was all I could think about. Yeah, I love that rush, that feeling that it gave me. But after a while, that rush died and just became part of the norm. I remember feeling the urge to do more than just kiss. That urge grew stronger and stronger, and I began slowly trying new things, and again I was filled with even greater rush, and the urge to go further continued growing, and I listened to it. Throughout high school, I dated many girls with no intention of a long-lasting relationship. So I got to a point in my life where all my relationships were ending horribly, and I could just feel myself change, and I was becoming a person I didn't like. I felt like I had just lost all innocence, and I just couldn't shake this feeling of guilt and shame and embarrassment, and it followed me around kind of like a shadow. Diane was just this really sweet and innocent person. I just became captivated by her faith. When she prayed, she actually looked like she was talking to God, and I always felt like when I prayed, I was more like sending out a fishing line and kind of just waiting for a bite. She had this peace and serenity and just seemed genuinely happy, and I seemed okay on the outside, but on the inside it was chaos. I longed for that type of peace and innocence. She just had something I didn't have, and I wanted it. I started becoming really attached to Diane, and after some time I finally got the courage to tell her that I liked her and that I wanted to start dating. And she said, "All right, well, I like you too, but if you ever want to even think about having a relationship, or the possibility of a relationship, there are 3 things I want you to do." And she said, the first thing is, if we decide to have a relationship, then I want you to ask my father's permission, because it's important for me to have my family involved, and I want him to give us permission first. So I thought, well, I can do that, it's a piece of cake. What's next? The second thing is, she hands me this huge, thick blue book, and she said, I want you to read this book. This is something that, there's some things I want to tell you, and if you don't read this book first, you're not going to understand. So I looked at the book and I thought, well, these tasks are getting a little bit harder, but I can read this book no problem. She didn't give me the third task. She told me I had to finish the book first, and the book was it was called Arms of Love by Carmen Marcoux. And I related to the male character at the beginning of the book, and I wanted badly to be like the character at the end of the book. It gave me hope, and it inspired me. I was ready for that third task. So when we got together to talk about the book, I was all excited, telling her this is the greatest book I had ever read, and she gave me the third task, and I wasn't at all prepared for what she was about to ask of me. She started telling me about an experience where that she had with a guy who had hurt her. He humiliated her, after he took advantage of her. So she was so heartbroken that she drove herself straight to a nearby church, and in her sobbing, she makes this promise to Mary and to God that she would not kiss another man until she was standing with him before the altar on her wedding day. And then she said, if you want to be with me, then you have to take on that promise too. The next thing I tried to do was convince her that it was probably not a good idea. I said, I don't, that's amazing that you want to make that promise, that's cool, but I don't think kissing's a bad thing, before marriage. And she said, oh, I know, it's not a bad thing. I made that promise because I wanted to keep myself from falling into doing more than just kissing, and kissing can easily lead into other things, and if we don't kiss, then I don't have to worry about that. And I know that the guy that's willing to take on this promise for me will be the man that I can marry. I know that he'll be the man who loves me for me and not just my body. Obviously this girl was prepared to have this debate, and I wasn't. In fact, I was thinking, wow, that's a really good point. But sensible or not, I was pretty sure that there's no way I could even do this, even if I wanted to. But I like this girl so much that I reluctantly told her, if that's your promise, I guess I have to respect that. She set the standard high, and she wasn't willing to compromise. She said, take it or leave it, and since there was no negotiation, I had no choice but to agree to the terms. I only said yes to respect Diane's promise because I knew it was the only way I could be in a relationship with her. Luckily, that was enough to cause a major shift in my life. And often when I tell people my story, I use the example that I was something like a drug addict who went into rehab, and those first couple months were like hell for me. Trying to kick my addictions to lust was a lot like trying to cut off my own arm. It was so much a part of the person that I was. The good news is that my relationship with Diane started improving things for me, because she was so physically distant. It was a lot easier for me to control myself, but I was also able to think clearly without the smoke of lust clouding my thoughts. Learning the truth of morality in the Catholic Church was much easier when I wasn't constantly involved in sin. We went to a faith conference one Saturday, and at the sellers tables I noticed this book called An Introduction to Theology of the Body by Christopher West. And I remember the book Arms of Love that Diane had given me, when on the back it said it was based on something called Theology of the Body. And so I was interested just to know what it was. So I took it home with me, and I just devoured this book. I fell in love with the theology of the body, and I just began to buy anything I could get my hands on concerning the theology of the body. The teaching was amazing, and it opened my eyes to God's plan for life, love, marriage, and sex. It explained all the desires I had for union, and it showed how God purposely gave us sexual desires and created us male and female so that we could come to know Him. It claimed that the marital union of male and female was a sign of heaven, a symbol of the nature of God. If we only had the eyes to see God's wonderful plan for life, love, sex, and marriage, we would all be blown away by its beauty and its power. This theology of the body began to open my eyes to His new reality, and I began to realize just how special Diane was, and her innocence became like a priceless work of art to me. Diane and I became very close over the next 2 years, and we began talking about, possibly getting married, and we stayed open to the possibility of a religious vocation. And we prayed together, we did ministry together, and everything was just wonderful. One summer, Diane decided she went to World Youth Day in Sydney, Australia. She had an awesome experience. She came back on fire, just talking about how wonderful it was, and these nuns that she met that she had a great time with, and she felt so close to these nuns, and she started entertaining the idea of a vocation to the religious order, and now she was convinced that God was calling her. My heart just sank into my stomach. I felt my mind sort of panic, and I was just thinking, oh God, what are you doing? Don't take her. My whole world just turned upside down, and I just thought, well, what am I gonna do? I thought we were meant for each other, and a deep pain shot through me and through my heart at the thought that I would never be able to experience what it was like to kiss the lips of the girl that changed my life forever. I valued our relationship so much, but I realized that I also valued what the relationship had done for me. I realized that I had no regrets. I decided that I needed to swallow my fears and just love Diane enough to allow her the opportunity to pursue God's call for her. I knew I had to do what was best for her, whether or not it was painful for me. So one day while we're talking on the phone, I decided to do what needed to be done. I started off telling her how much life had changed since I had met her, and how grateful I was that God brought her into my life, and I knew that my job was to make her happy. And if we were called to marriage, my job would be to do what was best for her and to help her get to heaven. And if we weren't called to marriage, then whatever vocation she was called to would be where she was going to find her fulfillment. So I told Dan, if that's where God's calling you, then I can't hold you back. I won't hold you back. I told her I loved her, and we parted ways. For 3 days we didn't even talk. Diane thought she might change her mind if we continued to talk as much as we did. And after 3 days, she called me and invited me to adoration and prayer at the local church that we were used to going to together. And she wanted to pray for guidance, and she wanted me to be with her for support. And so I did. I went with her, and we prayed together. We talked. We laughed. And I was so happy just to be with her that I almost forgot that we had agreed to go our separate ways. We had such a great time that day and that week. In fact, we started going to Mass and adoration together every day to pray for guidance. And like a dying fire that just needed a spark, our love and our relationship was rekindled. We fell in love all over again, except this time there was a confidence in our relationship that we never had. Within about a month or so, we were engaged. I felt like a real man for the first time ever in my life. Men are created to be protectors and to serve the woman they love, to lay down their lives for them. And for the first time, I said no to my body and my desires. And I gave my fears over to God, and I just said yes to His will for me. I finally figured out the solution to becoming a real man, and it's to be crucified, to love another more than you love yourself. And when I made that decision, I proved to Diane and to myself that I was willing to go to the cross for her. Her happiness and fulfillment was worth the price of my life. From the point that I told Diane that I loved her enough to support her pursuing God's calling, even if it wasn't with me, she knew that I loved her more than I loved myself. She knew that I feared her pain more than my own. And she knew that I was the guy that she could give herself to in marriage. A year and a half later, her and I are standing at the altar. She's beautiful, she's dressed in white, and she's looking so beautiful and holy. And I just remember I had all my family and friends present, and they all got to witness my very first kiss with my bride.